Good day, and welcome to our Ransford's Weekly Wraps. I am Viv Govender. This week we're trying to our more normal schedule where we're looking at more macroeconomic, general macroeconomic issues, and of course an AI segment, but without the kind of total focus as we had in the last couple of weeks on Trump. Things have effectively calmed down a little bit, as calm as they can be expected to be under a Trump administration at the moment. But we still obviously have to talk about the latest development in the US, but we'll also talk about South Africa's VAT agreement, as well as the latest inflation numbers. Then in our AI segment, we look at two things. Firstly, the development of chips in China, and secondly, O3, the latest model from OpenAI, and some questions people are having about just how good the model is. So let's start off with the latest from Trump land. Trump has pulled back significantly on some of his tariff threats, offering what some people consider to be a olive branch to China, though the Chinese are basically being a bit cautious about accepting it. We are seeing, some turmoil around some of his movements with regards to things like immigration. And Elon Musk has basically announced that he's probably going to leave Doge in the next month or two. Some people are saying that this is what's to be expected in a normal administration. The first 100 days or so, and we're approaching the first 100 days of the Trump administration. Remember, he got inaugurated on the 20th of January. And as I speak to you right now, it's just about the 22nd of April. So it's just almost 3 months. And 3 months or so, or 100 days roundabout, is when you would expect most presidencies to basically run out of steam. Well, the first 100 days, the presidency basically is about what you are doing. After the first 100 days or so, it's more about what happens in the world and how you have to react to it. I mean, George W. Bush was not thinking about 9/11. When he was doing, when he was basically starting off for planning for his presidency. But obviously things happen and then you have to deal with it. And once you get past the first few months of any US presidency, generally what happens is the events of the world take over and you basically are more reactive than active in terms of policies and so on. So we're approaching that point, and we could maybe expect Trump to not maybe calm down himself, but some of the things he's putting into place to run out of steam, just because of the fact that he won't have the initiative or the the political capital anymore to try and push things through as strongly as he did at the start of the administration, even though, like I said, that's only 3 months ago. So that's one thing. The Doge thing to be expected. Musk had always said he's not going to spend, the entire term. In fact, Doge was supposed to end by the middle of next year. Him leaving after 3 months is a bit quick. But remember, he's still the richest man in the world. And he really does have other things to think about besides just government, especially Tesla, which has now come under huge pressure. The Tesla share price is still up, year on year quite significantly, but it's well off its recent highs. And recent sales from Tesla have been very disappointing. In fact, it's some of the worst numbers Tesla has seen since basically the pandemic, which is obviously, not a great thing to show for a company that has a massive P ratio, which a massive P ratio indicates that the market is expecting growth. You need not just to be basically holding what you have, but growing significantly to justify current valuations for Tesla. Tesla is not just not doing that, it's basically shrinking in terms of total sales. Things like the Cybertruck have not been producing the number of sales that people have been hoping for. And even their models, their Tesla models like the Y and the 3, etc., are not quite at the point at which, you would want them to be. In some cases, they are the number one sellers for their categories, but they are not, if you compare it to, for instance, the model selection of a Toyota or a Volkswagen, no individual model is selling as much as some of the stuff that Tesla is selling, but they have many more models, and therefore they sell many more cars in total. And so it makes sense for us to step back on that. We also are seeing, we've been trying to develop a new company, that's the XAI company, which is now, wrapped into Twitter or X, as how you want to call it. And so it makes sense that he's also leaving. But like I said, it's part of the same theme. The theme being that the administration is running out of steam. They don't have the ability to push through the crazy plans they had in the past. At the same time, some of his appointees, like Pete Hegseth, who's in charge of defense, are facing issues. He's also getting a lot of pushback with regards to his immigration policy. The thing is that it was never going to be possible to really deport the numbers of people that came in during the Biden administration with any kind of legality. Why? Because people walking through the border, across the border, it's a day, maybe less than that, of procedures, and they're suddenly in the US. But once they're in the US, taking them out, it's going to be, months, maybe more, of legal wrangling, with lawyers involved, with courts involved, to get them out of the country. Trump basically has tried to get around this by, using things like the Alien Combatants or whatever it is act, where what we talked about is like an act from over a couple hundred years ago, which kind of like says that if you're being invaded, you don't have to give each person that's invading you from the invading country, due process to get them out of the country. Kind of makes sense. If you're being invaded, you can't actually basically give each soldier on the opposing, army, to this rights. You have to basically, deal with them more expeditiously. And he's using this particular thing to go after countries like, for instance, Venezuela, because he says, no, this is part of an invasion. He's classifying the immigration crisis as an invasion, and then this gives him the right to kick these people out without due process. And there have been people caught up in this particular, sweep that are quite likely, not, alien combatants. There's a case of a hairdresser that is quite likely, somebody got caught up unintentionally. There's another man that's also been caught up as well, though there is some dispute about whether or not he's, a member of a gang or not. But though the court has said that there's no, that he should be, the law wasn't followed to kick him out. And in fact, early on in the process, there was actually an admission by the Trump administration officials, at least, that this was done as a clerical error. So he was kicked out as a clerical error. Since it's emerged that he's not quite as squeaky clean as some people had hoped for, but there's no doubt that his, eviction from the US or deportation from the US was likely not, according to the strict rule of the law. And the thing is that these guys are not just being sent home to their home countries; they've been sent to a prison, to El Salvador, which is being considered to be one of the most, one of the most draconian prisons in the world, especially in the Western Hemisphere. You've seen images, if you have looked online, of people with shaved heads, in their underwear, hundreds of them, thousands of them, in some cases, basically kneeling on the ground. And this is where these guys are being sent to, not to, just deported back to their home countries to live their lives as they want. Like I said, again, big kickback by the courts, and likely to be a dominant theme going forward. With all this pushback that they're getting with the courts, with people leaving, with political capital being expended, it's going to be very difficult for Trump to basically have new policies coming into place. And so from that point of view, we might be ending that particular chaotic era of the Trump administration. Next, on to VAT. Speaking of a chaotic era under administration, the VAT increase has been pulled back. According to the Finance Department, South Africa's Finance Department, it's going to create like a 75 billion rand hole in the budget, which has to be filled in some way. And they're talking about, looking at spending, but I doubt that they can find 75 billion rands of spending not to basically cut in South Africa. It's going to be very difficult to do that. If you're not going to be able to increase income tax, what are your options going to be? We are not looking at basically doing much of corporate tax because it's just too uncertain. You're not going to be able to get much in terms of other things out there. We're not going to be able to raise money from tariffs, etc., like maybe the US is looking to do. So income tax is probably going to be the next port of call for government. Don't know exactly how they're going to do it. They've already basically had a slight or a sneaky income tax increase by not adjusting the brackets for inflation. And so I do think that it's going to be some kind of thing around income tax that's going to be the next option for the government to try and close that 75 billion rand hole in their budget. Also, in terms of South Africa, we had latest inflation numbers coming out, and they came in quite low. Some of the lowest numbers we've seen since the pandemic, well below 3%. Given the current environment where we are looking at slow growth, inflation as low as we're talking about here, I do expect that if we are going to be looking at moves going forward, there's going to be increasing pressure on the Reserve Bank to look at cutting interest rates. We really don't need interest rates as high as they are if inflation is well below 3%. It's below our target level. We really don't need to have that kind of extremely high real returns on money, basically. And that's what it is. If you think about it, if inflation is really low and then interest rate stays the same, effectively you increase the real interest rate in the country. And that's not the situation we need to be in South Africa, considering our current growth rate. So I do think that there's probably going to be some move around, lowering inflation, also interest rates going forward, especially if inflation stays the way it is. And one of the big drivers of inflation, that's one of the reasons it's been as weak as it has been the oil price, which still remains below $70 a barrel as I speak to you. How long it can stay this low, I don't know. I know many countries in the world, like a place like Nigeria and like Saudi Arabia, etc., don't want oil prices this low, and they are the big oil exporters in the world. But I do think that as long as oil prices remain as low as this, there's still fears about global recession. We could see inflation really remain under control, and that should give us a room to cut interest rates. Now, moving on to the AI/tech segment, let's look at first the OpenAI's release of O3 and O4 Mini. O3, by the way, is the flagship. The O4 Mini is not the best model. It's a very weird naming structure. You'd expect the 4 to be better than the 3, but the Mini makes it weaker. So O3 is the latest model from OpenAI, the new flagship model, multimodal and a number of different things that they have in there. But the thing about this particular model is that there has been improvements. There's no doubt about that. But the improvements have not really been shown in the real world, like experience of the people using the model has not quite reflected the level of improvement that has been shown by benchmarks. Now, I talked about this before with you guys. We've passed the time at which the feel that you have around a AI model will be a correct, determination of how powerful it is. Because these models were smarter than most people are in the fields that they are good at. And so, for instance, you just are not going to be able to test this model at a level that's going to be high enough to determine its full power. And therefore, now they're using these benchmarks. But the problem with benchmarks is the benchmark is known. If people know what a benchmark is, you can kind of, cheat by making the model train on the benchmark. So you kind of focus the model to try and pass the benchmark. And so there's been big improvements in benchmarks, but the real world experience of people using the model has not quite caught up with the kind of improvements we're seeing with these benchmarks. Whether it is because people are not smart enough to actually fully utilize it, or whether it is because the benchmark is being kind of hacked. There's no clear proof there. I suspect it is because the benchmark has been kind of hacked. I suspect that we have approached the end of what an LLM can do for us. We already have a significant chunk of the data on the internet right now being what's called AI slop, which is basically generated by AI. And an AI cannot go and be trained on the stuff that another AI generated. Why? Because there's no new information there. Human input, human data, there's always new information from that. But AI data is not always new information from that. And in fact, it's usually, like I said, what's called slop. And studies have shown that the more slop you have in the system, the more likely that you are going to basically degrade the quality of the model coming out. And this doesn't need to occur at a point where it's half the stuff is slop and half the stuff is real data. Even at very low, even like single digits, to a percentage of the data being slop, you are seeing drops in terms of outcomes. And that's we definitely passed the single digit levels at the moment. Now, that does not mean the AI is over. In fact, it does mean, however, that we are in a situation in which the current models are over. We can't expect to see AI effectively scaling at the same level we saw in the past continue without some new improvements. But there are new improvements coming about. One of the ways to get around the AI slop stuff is to actually have real world data. The thing with real world data is it's beneficial in two ways. Firstly, it's not slop. It's not fake data or manufactured data. Number one. Number two is that you often don't need to have human beings verify whether or not the results are good or bad. And I think that is the next step up that we're likely to see from the AI space. This new, tools. The thing is, it's reinforced learning with human feedback that creates the AI system that we're seeing right now. But in terms of the what we're looking at in terms of the new systems coming about, there's going to be an additional level of training that's happening more on an automatic basis for these AI machines, which would, I think, to a certain extent, have allowed them to overcome some of these data issues and return us to that scaling, norm. And speaking of scaling, the Chinese seem to be developing, chips that are comparable to, or at least useful enough in the AI space. They may not be as good as the best stuff out of NVIDIA, but they are definitely, usable in training AI models and using AI models. Huawei in particular has come up with some really interesting new chips at the moment. At the same time, we've seen the Trump administration really cut back on what the Chinese can import. So NVIDIA had a specially designed chip that they had designed around the latest or the last set of restrictions to the Chinese exports. Those chips were restricted to things like what's called flops. It's soon been realized that what's called bandwidth memory is as important, if not more important in some cases, for training AI. And so the Trump administration has gone out and basically banned the export of these particular chips that were created specifically for the Chinese market and specifically to conform to the old set of rules. This is one of the reasons we saw NVIDIA fall as substantially as we'd had a few days ago, was because they basically are losing roughly 13% of their marketplace, because that's what China buys from them at the moment. And some people have argued that it's actually a larger chunk, maybe closer to 50% of the marketplace is going to be lost, because there's many countries out there that are buying a significant amount of AI models without really having a significant AI or significant amount of AI chips, without having a significant AI infrastructure or AI sector at the moment. Singapore, huge amount of chips they're buying. Is it for themselves or is it to ship on to China? Lots of Southeast Asian countries, Cambodia, etc., are buying Vietnam. They're buying a lot of these chips, but they're not basically having models coming from these countries. Where the chips going to? Likely they're going to China. But like I said, this is a temporary measure. There's no ways that the US government is going to be able to control China's development of AI chips going forward, especially if you give them a few years. And in fact, I may have been pessimistic saying a few years, because we're already starting to see chips come out of China that are able to do the job. Not as efficiently, not as quickly as some of the stuff from NVIDIA, but if you just throw more money at a less efficient chip, you can still get the same performance at the end of the day. And the Chinese are willing to throw that money at it. So yeah, that is the latest developments out of China. And look, I think it's getting very clear that the Chinese, though they are maybe less than a year behind the Americans, they are progressing at a faster rate than I had thought possible. And in the next couple of years, we could easily see the Chinese basically either catching up, or maybe even taking the lead from what the Americans have at the moment. And in that scenario, I think we're going to enter a new, more dangerous phase of the AI race, because we already started to see people talk about, the military applications of AI. And if you're thinking that another country is going to have an insurmountable lead in the AI space, that means insurmountable military lead in the AI space, which is something in which you start thinking of out-of-the-box solutions to try and cut that lead down. And that's obviously a very dangerous world to live in. Okay, that's it for this week. Thanks for joining me. I look forward to speaking again next week. Cheers.